So debugging in FinPower Connect, obviously, I assume all of you that have attended are familiar enough with the script editor and the script editor control that we use in FinPower Connect. Script editor control in FinPower Connect is not quite as feature rich as something like Visual Studio or a full IDE, and doesn't allow us to do things like breakpoints, break scripts through execution, step through code, etc., etc. But it does allow us to debug messages out to our debug window or debug console. So historically, over the years, we have always had a debug print method available to us in the business layer, which we just initialized very simply with Fbl Debugger Print, and we can print messages in here. If we run that script up now, you can see here, it prints that to the debug page in our script and also off to our debug window. In the later iterations of FinPower Connect, we added on the ability to be able to extend the debug print method to also be able to print an entire object. So as you can see here, we've loaded an account object from the database, and we can print a representation of that account, reflecting all of its properties and methods and values out to the debug screen also. So if we run that one through, you can see here, it's going to run through that account, and all of the fields, properties, sub-objects, sub-collections are all listed out, including the values that have been assigned to that account. So very, very useful, but still not quite at the level that we'd like in terms of interaction with our code. So we have introduced things like debug format and debug watch. Our debug format is very similar to our debug print. It will print a message, but it will allow us to parameterize that message, and is the preferred debug print for anyone who's going to be debugging multiple properties or multiple values in their debug message. So you can see here, using the standard format, we're able to add parameters to our debug message and resolve them. And if we run that through, you can see there our account ID and our account status has been output to the screen, and again, similarly to the output to the debug window, which we can obviously clear at any time. Debug Watch was the next thing we added to the script editor in terms of debugging features. Our Debug Watch allows us much the same as printing the entire object. It reflects all of its properties and methods and values. However, it allows us to inspect the object and navigate any sub-collections or sub-objects contained within the object. So you can see here is our fin account, and we can drill down on some of our collections, our accounting ledgers, etc., etc. And we obviously also have the all of the fields and all of the associated values with that particular loaded account. And you'll also notice that in the bottom pane of the Debug Watch window, we also have the business layer help page that's associated with not only the object, but each of its fields and collections. And obviously that's really, really useful. The business layer help is a very, very large resource, and not always the easiest of things to navigate. So to be able to come into an object Debug Watch and be able to work your way through and see the associated help page for those fields is obviously very useful. Version 3.4.3 of FinPower Connect, we took it a step further and we added in a Fbl Debugger Launch. What Debug Launch enables us to do is to basically launch an external IDE. In the case currently supported IDEs are just Visual Studio. We can launch Visual Studio, we can add breakpoints, we can step through our code as if we were basically coding the script natively in Visual Studio. Now, obviously, you can't update the code and expect to see it back inside of FinPower Connect, but it does allow you to step through the code as we go. It works with later versions of Visual Studio and all versions of Visual Studio Community. And indeed, Visual Studio Community 2019 is what I'm running here. It works absolutely fine. So we simply add a Fbl Debugger Launch line into our script at the point we wish to interrupt the execution of our code. Now that we have to choose a just-in-time debugger, and if you have it already open, it'll ask if you want to open it in a current instance or a new instance. In this case, obviously, I don't have it open, so we'll open the new instance of Visual Studio. You can see here is our script, and it's paused at our Fbl Debugger Launch line. So from here, we can go through and we can add breakpoints, and we can step through and step over code in exactly the same way as if we were running that script from within inside the Visual Studio editor. So F10 to move through our code. You can see here we also have all of our objects loaded, so we can see all of our functions and properties. And if we F11, you can see here we're about to go into another function. All in here, we can go through. And that was deliberate, don't worry. So for version 3.4.3, as I say, is the first iteration of our script debugger. Now, we noticed post-release that there were one or two issues with the new debugger, namely one that's obviously appeared on screen here is the default timeout of 60 seconds was exceeded for the script. So obviously we haven't cleared our timeout, and therefore that script timer just continues to go in the background. So unlike something like Debug Watch, which actually pauses these, or rather just ignores the script timeout, Debug Launch in version 3.4.3, which is obviously the latest release version, doesn't do that and will continue to go. So just something to be aware of and bear in mind as you're working through. I've taken that off, rerun debugger. Our account, and once we hit the end of our script, it simply returns back to into Fbl Connect. So really useful. It's something that we've been wanting for many years, and so really pleased that we have that in there. There are one or two known issues which are being resolved in 3.4.4. So namely the script timeout. But also in 3.4.3, it is only available if you are licensed for portals. That again was a slight oversight. So you will not see the option. You will not be able to use it unless the database you're working is licensed for portals. But again, 3.4.4 will address that, and it will be available for everybody. Also, currently in the current release version, under user preferences, there are developer general option. You can see here is the option to enable the debugger facility. So you specifically have to go on and switch that on. 3.4.4, we have removed that option and we have made the debugger a more session-based option. So if I just open up the latest test build and show you under tools and utilities, you can see here we now have a menu option to enable the debugger. Once that's been enabled, that will be enabled for this session. So as soon as we close that database, begin a new session for Fbl Connect, that setting is gone. And that's really just been done as a bit of a safeguard, because obviously if you were to leave a Fbl Debugger Launch line in place in any script that ended up going out to a client, then obviously potentially it's not going to look very good for your end users. Obviously having it session-based reduces any risk of the debugger launching at any time it shouldn't do. So as I say, there are some issues, known issues, and they have been addressed in the latest version, which obviously is due for release later this year. Okay. As I alluded to earlier, all of our debug messages are output to our debug console or a debug window. That's accessed via the tools menu from your script or via the tools utilities menu from Power Connect. And we have a range of options available to us in here. Obviously, debug, self-explanatory. All of the debug messages that have been pushing out will display there. You can switch on any errors, and also Sql. We have options for Sql Trace and warning. Sql is a really useful one to select, particularly when you are working on a script that is interrogated in the Power Connect database. So if you have a script that's running a query, as you go and test your script or run your script, you will see the associated query appear in your debug window if you have the Sql option selected. And that's really useful because it helps identify any performance issues or bottlenecks with any scripts. And also, as you're working your way through the user interface, you'll just notice that if this option is checked on, then you'll see all of the calls to the database that are being made in the background as you navigate through the UI. But as I say, typically as a debug tool for scripts, it's really useful. You can see how you can identify very quickly any bottlenecks with any queries you may have written. We have a duration column here, which is obviously in milliseconds. The higher that value, the more likely you run into an issue. Obviously, you can achieve the same thing with things like SQL Server profiling, but it is very useful as an at a glance thing. As well as the options up the top here, we also have an information tab at the bottom, which is often forgotten. It does actually contain some pretty useful information, specifically around database versions and obviously licensing information. But we also now have a future compatibility information section in there as well. So anybody looking to upgrade a client to a later version in Power Connect, this is a useful thing to come and have a quick look at. It'll obviously highlight any obsolete functionality, and also make you aware of anything that might be discontinued in future versions. So like I say, very useful tool for anyone looking to upgrade any of their clients. As well as that, we also have some script usage information. Particularly useful, I find the object event scripts section.
Okay. You doing okay?
Yeah. The object events.
Yeah.
I just put myself on mute. That was incredibly foolish. Apologies. So I was not saying anything interesting, just about the object event scripts. So we have a table here which shows us any object event scripts that have been used in the database and where they have been configured. Obviously, object event scripts, as we know, can be configured and set up in global settings, but also in account types, client groups, product types, etc., etc. Same game with wizard validators. And then right at the bottom, we also have some database table information and statistics, so we can get a very quick view. Again, stuff that you can get through SQL Server Management Studio, but it's nice and easy to get this, get some very basic database table statistics just via the debug window. Okay, so the last thing I wanted to run through today, it's not debug related, but is script editor related, and was a change we put in a few versions ago to include what we're calling our power tools. So in a script window, open up a script, pop it into edit mode and right click, and you'll see this power tools submenu in our context menu. And this has some options in here to be able to sort our variable declarations and sort methods, sort lines, all in alphabetical order. So anyone that's familiar with our programming standards, our coding standards here, knows that we like to, for readability, we like to have all of our variables declared at the top of our functions, and we like to have those in alphabetical order. And this is a nice, neat little tool which will go and sort your variables for your entire script in all of your functions and sub methods. So no reason not to have that one enabled. If we right click again, you can see here there's also a sort lines method. Now this will sort a selection of script lines by an alphabetical order. So obviously you need to be a little bit careful for this. This is really only useful for if you were to be creating your own custom classes and listing properties and things out in your script. That might be useful for ordering things in alphabetical order. However, if you just blanket start applying that to script code, then it's going to do some pretty funky stuff with it. Final option we have in our Power Tools is the sort methods, and again that's an alphabetical sort. It's going to sort A to Z. You can see here we've got a function library which has a bunch of functions in it. Stop direct debits, update minus category in no particular alphabetical order. Run through and sort our methods. You can see now that that's actually gone and put all of those into alphabetical order for us. Like I say, very minor thing, but it is useful, particularly when it comes to readability and reviewing scripts. And that just about wraps up everything I have to show you this week. Obviously, there will be another session that's business layer related in another 4 weeks' time. That'll be our next cycle.